welcome everyone. I know that wasn't for me, so but welcome. I'm going to do a quick introduction here, and then we'll get the show on the road. In celebration of Aviation Week, it's my honor to introduce a very special guest, Mr. Jared Isaacman, who's with us here today. And by the way, they're incredibly busy with a lot of things going on, and the fact that the team is here we're just so grateful. Thank you. Jared is an entrepreneur, space explorer, accomplished pilot, and philanthropist. Plane he flew in is right behind him there, so you get a sense for that. And I'll just mention a few highlights. I think most of you know this, but I think it's important. Jared founded Shift4 Payments in 1999 and grew to be an amazing business, serving over 220-some thousand businesses. About a third of all hotels and restaurants use that service. At the ripe old age of 26, he completed the fastest around-the-world flight. And then in 2011, he founded a defense firm called Draken International, and today the International trains Air Force pilots and is the largest fleet of military aircraft worldwide. They're out here in Lakeland. And then last September, of course, all of you know, SpaceX Crew Dragon launched from the Kennedy Space Center, carrying the first ever all-civilian crew into space. 2 of the 4 crew members, Jared and along with Chris Zembrowski, were a part of that crew, so that's pretty amazing. Next up for Jared, he'll command the Polaris Dawn mission, and this is the first private space flight in a series of the Polaris program missions. The Polaris Dawn crew will also be the first team to test Starlink laser-based comm system in space. In addition to Jared, we're honored to be joined by several of his team here today, and sitting up front with us here, we have, let's see, Sean Gustafson. Sean, stand up. I hesitated because he has his call sign on his badge, Stoker. So he also flew for the Thunderbirds, number 4, and we welcome him here as well. And then Casey Phillips, project director. And John Kraus, content director. John? Is he John here? Oh, there we go, over here. And at this point, what I'd like to do is thank our 2 students who are going to be part of this program today. We have Alijah McDonald, aerospace engineering major. And Niko Blanks, he's a spaceflight operations major with a systems engineering minor. And of course, Dean Ken Witcher, Dean of the College of Aeronautics from our worldwide campus, will be part of the program here doing the interview. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to the stars of the show here and take my seat. So thank all of you for being here, and we're looking forward to a wonderful afternoon. Ken?
Thank you very much, Dr. Butler. We appreciate that for sure. And Jared, welcome to Embry-Riddle. I know you've been around here for a while, but this is the first time at Daytona Beach campus, right?
Yeah, this is great. Graduated from Embry-Riddle and never been to the campus at all to see it. So this is what it looks like. It's pretty incredible.
This is what it looks like. That's right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and coming out with us. You've had a pretty busy year since last time we got to talk about. It was about what about this time last year, I guess, just before the beginning of April. So a little over. We had a chance to chat as you guys were just putting together Inspiration 4 right before you announced your second 2 crew members. We had a chance to talk, and it's been a busy year since then for you.
Yeah, that's right. I think we were announcing the next day, so I had to just allude at that one of the other crew members also was an Embry-Riddle grad. But yeah, the year went by incredibly fast.
Yes, and we didn't tell anybody that, and if you saw that on social media, that wasn't me that pushed that out, by the way, on that for sure. So we appreciate that as well. Let's get to the important stuff here first. You guys with Inspiration 4 was able to raise over $240 million for St. Jude research. That's an amazing feat there, and I know you're all about opportunity and giving folks. And I wanted to add to what Dr. Butler was mentioning with our 2 students here. About a month ago, we had a chance to chat with you, Jared, while you were really busy. Kind of prepping for this conversation, and we asked you, what can we do for you? How can we help you? Anything we can do for you while you make the visit? And you said you wanted to focus on the students. And man, that's awesome, and we appreciate that. So we were able to get a couple of students on here, and Dr. Butler introduced them to you already, but I have a couple of really kind of cool things to mention here with the students as well. Alijah here is part of our Boeing scholarship program, And he's going to be aerospace engineer, by the way. He's going to be interning this summer with Boeing as well. So one of those opportunities where Boeing really stepped up for us and given an opportunity to fulfill his education. And Niko down there, Niko's kind of a cool story too. Niko, pediatric cancer survivor, actually was treated there in Lebanon, just down the street from St. Jude, and we know also benefited from that amazing research that St. Jude's doing over there as well. He's got, over the summer, he's going to be picking up with Blue Origin. Going to be working for those guys. So pretty happy to have him on stage with us.
Yeah.
That's right. So before we get into the details of the missions, which we're looking forward to chatting with you about, it's big picture, what do you think was the most important thing that Inspiration4 accomplished from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, really, there were a number of things that I think were important about it, but I think it was probably largely the messaging beyond just the mission in itself. That I mean, this is such an exciting time for human spaceflight. I mean, this is like the second age of space exploration 2.0, but it doesn't have to last indefinitely if opinions shift and people don't realize that it is important to make progress in space, but you can also make progress here for some of the the hardships that we're all faced with every single day. And if you lose sight of that messaging and people just see it as a big expenditure and a big waste, then we could see all this momentum that we've been gaining over the last couple of years completely reverse course. Like this is not set in stone at all. So I think the way we tried to approach Inspiration4 right from the start is like this is important. Like we do totally subscribe to the SpaceX vision that the world is a more interesting place when you can journey among the stars, but it can't all be just about that. We can do both, and that's why St. Jude was such an important part of it. It's a big part of how we went about our entire crew selection process, and I think that probably was one of the most important aspects of the mission itself. And then I think the second is showing that look, everyday people can go to space and be productive and be happy, and that you don't have to be like a perfect specimen that goes through this rigorous 1 in a million chance type screening process that it's been historically for astronauts, that people can go up and do it. And that's going to be important if whether it's Starship or other vehicles coming along actually become that 737 of spaceflight, and you're bringing up thousands and tens of thousands of people in space. So I'd say that was another important part of the mission.
Yeah, that's amazing. That perfect specimen like Stroker down here, right? Is that what you're talking about? We don't have to be like
clearly who I was referring to.
We don't have to be that to be an astronaut for sure. How many, raise a hand, how many of you was out in September last year and watched Inspiration4 go? Did you see that? That's what I figured right there.
Cool.
Yeah, no, you got a fan base here for sure. So let's talk about that flight a little bit. Niko, if you don't mind, let's start with some questions down there.
Yeah, Jared, I'd love to walk you through what was going through your mind up to Inspiration4. You're sitting in Dragon. It's counting down 10, 9, 8. What's going through your mind in that moment?
So it's interesting, right? There's a lot of time built into the schedule in case there's any last minute issues. So you actually are reasonably bored for some period of time. Like the action doesn't begin until about 40 minutes out, and that's when you arm the launch escape system, and that's when you begin prop load, and then there's a lot going on. But prior to that, you have like an hour and a half to kind of chill a little bit. So I think we were playing the score from Star Wars, and just entertaining ourselves. As we got down to really the last probably 20 seconds or so, and you saw the countdown clock, it just accelerates like crazy. Time seems to disappear. And I was actually thinking about a very close friend and mentor, and one of the greatest pilots of probably the last 50 years, Dale Snort Snodgrass, and he died actually just a couple months before the mission. And I was thinking about I was thinking about the advice that he would have been giving me in that moment, which is just hack it, and then the next thing you know, you had liftoff.
When at that point where you're lifting off, you're now riding 1.7 million pounds of thrust to space. What does that feel like?
Yeah. So coming off the pad, you don't have that much acceleration going on at all. You're barely better than 1-to-1 thrust to weight at that point. So there's just a lot of exhilaration. There's excitement. You feel a lot different going uphill because you have a lot of safety nets with the launch escape system. There's a lot that you can do in that situation. So I'd say there's just a lot of enthusiasm. You really aren't even feeling the acceleration forces until you get towards the latter portion of the second stage. You're kind of enjoying the ride. Now I will say that reverses entirely on the way back down, where you have very prolonged G forces, and there's absolutely like no safety nets other than the thermal protection system and the heat shield. So that's a little bit more of like a high blood pressure moment, I would describe it as.
When you're re-entering after the mission, what kind of are you getting any sense of speed of how fast you're going entering the atmosphere when you slam into the Earth's atmosphere?
You sure do. And I think part of it is just based on the various altitudes that we traveled through on our mission. So, I mean, at one point we were circularized at just under 600 kilometers, and then we started to phase down about 24 hours prior to splashdown as we were kind of determining which of the splashdown sites we were gonna target. So, as you come down from 600 to about called 300 and change. The world looks different, and you can actually get a much better sense of how fast you're traveling at that point than you can when you're farther away. Once the orbit sequence starts and you start to enter the atmosphere, you can just even look out through the windows and start to get a sense of your velocity at that point. And then, of course, the moment you start smashing into the denser part of the atmosphere, then you're feeling it pretty quick.
Did you get a chance to look out the window and see the plasma just rolling off the vehicle?
So we have a video of this, and it's, I don't know, we just gotta put it out there. It's like 30 minutes and 28 minutes of it is relatively uninteresting, but 2 minutes is pretty cool. What I will say though is that it's nothing like Right Stuff, Apollo 13. You're certainly scorching that thing, but from what you can see in the windows, it's more of like pulses of fluorescent light. And I've gone back and looked at the video a few times. Like, you do not feel that you are engulfed in a fireball. It's very pleasant. It's more of a light show, and actually it's consistent. We looked at Crew 1's video as well prior to our launch, and it looked almost identical to it. So it's not as scary as it would appear to be in like the movies.
Well, that's good to hear, Jared. So I want to roll it back a little bit to on your way up. There's got to be there's a moment where your engine's cut off.
Yes.
And it's just what's that experience when you just go into 0G and you're just there? Can you explain that?
Yeah, and so you do get it at Niko also. So it is just for everyone in here who's gone flying. I mean, it is just a big unload event. I mean, right at main engine cutoff, you're just hanging in the straps, and it feels like forever. It's seconds, but it feels like a minute goes by before the second stage ignites, and now you're kind of back in your seat again. It's the exact same sensation when you're at SECO. It's exactly the same, just instantaneous. You're just in microgravity, and everything is floating around you. It's the only difference between SECO and Niko is it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
You're just enduring it for the next couple days.
Well, that's super cool. So you get all the way up there. You get after second engine cut off. You're in orbit. You got a lot going on, right? You're making sure everything's going right. You've got a lot of things running through your mind, but in the back of your head, you're like, I'm in space, right? So what was your favorite part about being in orbit? Like, if you could come it down to one particular point, what would that be?
Maybe you got two options if you need it.
All right, there is two. So one element of it was, and it really didn't. None of these things really weighed on me until after I came back. So for everybody in the kind of flying programs here, you try to stay ahead of the aircraft, you stay ahead of the spaceship, and I'll tell you, as soon as you arrive on orbit, you're instantly behind, and you're trying to like catch up to everything that you just experienced over the last 9 minutes, and then what you're supposed to do next. And you kind of are very following a timeline that's that's drilled down to minutes, because you have only certain passes for ground station coverage or teachers passes where you're trying to do something in those windows. So you're just kind of moving on and on. It wasn't until I came back that I was thinking, like, you know, what were those like really incredible moments? I'd say one was just watching my crew members be themselves. That was so cool. Because that was, again, going back to the original thing, like what was one of the most important parts of it? Like we tried to have a very inspirational element to the whole mission. It was in our name, bringing people that had no idea they were, you know, going to have a chance to go to space, your everyday people, and then watching. I mean, you know, Chris playing the ukulele. I remember at the time I was like, well, this is cool, but I didn't take it as special until I came back. Watching, you know, Dr. Proctor do her artwork. You know, at the time I was thinking, man, if this is going to get everywhere. Like, if anybody knocks into this, we'll be spending the next day cleaning this up. And then, you know, you're back in your Earth, and you're like, wow, what an incredibly, you know, special moment. Haley, you know, she had a picture of herself as when she was going through her treatment that she took up. She took up a lot of very special St. Jude specific items, but that I think is probably number one, was watching them all be themselves and use that moment. I think, like, in terms of just a visual that really impacted me was a moonrise that I was not expecting. I mean, I was expecting Earth to look pretty much like it did. I mean, pretty good high resolution imagery of it. It's what it looks like. It's awesome. It radiates. It's the you know, the colors are so vibrant. It's certainly more impressive than any picture or video you see, but it looks generally like that. What I didn't expect is while I was looking at it to see kind of the moon come around from the sides, and I was like, man, we got to get back there. We're gonna keep going.
So, you know, you mentioned, like, that's got to be a amazing experience, right? Looking out the window for the first time and just getting a sense of, you know, you said you've seen high def pictures. It is what it looks like, but, you know, did it change the way you felt about things here on Earth? Just, I would imagine it does, but personally for you.
I mean, being very, very honest, like, I think, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of astronauts over the years, and they all talk about the overview effect. And honestly, I think a lot of them are just really great sounding talking points. Like, I mean, I don't think you need to go to space, you know, to know that we need to protect our planet, and that, you know, there shouldn't be conflict, and we shouldn't be fighting over borders drawn on map. And those are all the kind of generally things, and seeing the world without borders, and you know, seeing the world without conflict like that, and how fragile it is. Like, I think you should know that before you go up. And I don't think looking at it from that perspective changed that. To me, it really was seeing the moon. It was, you know, we know so very little in the grand scheme of things. And, you know, what do we want to do about that? I mean, how many more years do we want to wait before we continue to push out? And who knows what we could potentially learn? I mean, I think that, you know, since the beginning of humankind, there are a lot of questions that people periodically ask themselves that we do not have answers for, and there's probably a good chance we'll find them out there. So seeing the moon was more of an energizing feeling, like we can't let this momentum slow down. We just have to keep going.
So Jared, before we move beyond Inspiration 4, what you were saying back to the ride upstairs there. They were fueling the rocket while you guys were on board. That's a little different than what NASA's done in the past. How did it feel like the rocket was coming alive, that the Falcon was coming alive, or?
It sure did. That's true. So that was one of the many things that SpaceX had to work through before they, before human spaceflight returned to the U.S. with Falcon and Dragon. Was fueling with humans on board. I think there's a lot of comfort with the launch escape system that you can do that. It has phenomenal pad aboard capabilities. It absolutely comes. You can hear everything. You can hear every valve opening and closing. You can feel it. You can feel the prop coming on board. The venting. They play for us the sounds of Dragon, which they have recorded. Just so you're a little bit familiar with what you're going to go through, and it was awesome. It was really incredible to truly feel it, the vehicle coming alive.
Yeah, and then you watch the movies. Of course, we all do, and we think about it. You mentioned Apollo 13 when they were bringing it back, and it's shaking so much, and there's water coming off. Was it a rough ride upstairs, or was it pretty smooth?
It was really smooth. The only really the only people we could talk to about it before was really Crew 1 and Demo 2. So Crew 2 was up there while we flew, and you hear different things, like it's the second stage driving a pickup on a bumpy road. I didn't find it like that at all. I thought it was a very, very smooth ride, and on the way back, Dragon is an incredibly CG sensitive vehicle when you're traveling at those velocities. And it was like, look, if we trim it out right, it should be pretty nice. If we're a little off, it might be a little bit of a tumble event. I think violent was used to describe and I thought it was actually quite great. But I think we also had our CG right on the money. So.
Who did that trimming? Did you guys do that manually on board, or is that all the computers?
No. It's so you trim out the vehicle obviously before launch, but then as you're in orbit, you're consuming water. You're moving things around for sure. So no, there's definitely a big responsibility on our part. To make sure anything that's moved. Especially water, probably one of the biggest ones is that shifts around the vehicle, that we're keeping track of it. And then what we wind up doing after some smart people at Mission Control run the numbers, we start moving things around too, just prior to reentry, and mostly cargo and such. But
and again, another follow up here on the reentry when you come down. If you watch the Netflix countdown, how many of you have seen the countdown? I'm pretty sure that's about as many as watched the launch out there. When you came back in after you guys come out of blackout, and when you were coming up on comm, it sounded like you guys were either still under a pretty good G, or you guys are pretty excited. How did that feel after you guys got into drogue shoots first time?
We were probably still under some pretty. You're probably like 4.6 or so Gs at, when we made the first call, and it actually feels way worse than that, because your body deconditions over, right. even in a short period of time, like 3 days, you definitely decondition. It feels a little bit more intense. So, but actually the drogues and the mains were. They were not violent. It was just as expected. We actually, in the centrifuge runs, every bit of it was based on data that was taken from prior Falcon and Dragon flights, and we flew the profile. So, it actually felt just like it did in the sim on the centrifuge, on the drogues and the mains coming out. Nice. Even simulated, anticipated rocking in the water for 45 minutes. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that could be the downfall right there, right? Setting nose for 45 minutes.
Can get you.
Speaking of setting in the ocean, you guys, first time ever, I think, Cape North, I think you guys splashed down in, and just off the Cape there, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, first time a human spacecraft landed in the Atlantic since the Apollo program, so that was pretty awesome. But that's SpaceX at work. They're like, breaking records all the time, and reminding us of really interesting times of the early days of the space program pretty regularly.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, let's move over into let's move forward into the Polaris mission. So, Niko, you got a couple questions there with Polaris?
Yeah, for me, as a pediatric cancer survivor myself, it was really amazing to see that you're continuing that partnership with St. Jude past Inspiration4 into Polaris. Can you talk a little bit about that future partnership and what that's going to look like?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think, as I mentioned before, this is one of the most important parts of what we're doing with Polaris, and I think the entire commercial space industry has to be mindful, of balancing out this progress for a more interesting world we all want to see for tomorrow, with some of the real needs of today. I just think you can't lose sight of that, or you really risk it all. I don't think the whole world, the message of becoming multi-planetary, resonates with everybody. I think it is important, and, we certainly are all kind of true believers, but there are people that are going through incredibly difficult times right now that aren't thinking about, a colony on Mars. So, we really said it since the beginning. Like, we do believe in a world where, there will be a Martian colony someday. We will be multi-planetary, and we should try and conquer childhood cancer along the way and do a lot of other things. I'll tell you, with the Polaris program, it's a much deeper partnership now with SpaceX. So the amount of research we're able to take up on this one is like literally an order of magnitude more than I-4. So we've got, and St. Jude will be sending up some items too, but we have, the Mayo Clinic involved. We have kind of cancer cells and tumors that we're going to be able to take up. We are really trying to make sure, just like with I-4, really that we're using every minute we can that we're lucky enough to have, for far more wider reaching and important purposes, and a lot of it does focus on cancer research.
Did you know from the beginning with Inspiration4 that that's what you wanted to focus on in terms of bringing space and philanthropy on Earth together, or did that click later on in that process?
No, it was right from the beginning. Yeah, right from the beginning. We as soon as we found out about Inspiration4 and we knew that it was a first, there was no question. So I've had a relationship with St. Jude and Make-A-Wish Foundation for 20 some odd years. When we flew air shows, Make-A-Wish was the organization we partnered with on every one of them. We'd bring Wish Kids out to the VIP tents. We would auction off flights in L-39s for them. The Around the World flights were for Make-A-Wish. So that's actually where I was initially thinking at first, and I've gotten in trouble for saying this line, but when I realized like what the potential was of Inspiration4, I gravitated towards St. Jude because it felt like if you can raise substantial dollars, then you'll have a lot less wishes you'll need to grant. And that it was, I'd say like within 48 hours of knowing Inspiration4, we were working with St. Jude.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned that Polaris Dawn, the first mission, you guys are going to be working with cancer cells and cancer research. Could you elaborate more on the overall project goals of the Polaris missions, and more specifically the first Polaris Dawn?
Yeah, I mean, the overall, first of all, everything is guided based on the eventual goal of people walking on Mars. I mean, that's, if Starship flies, for sure. I mean, people will go back to the moon, but it's not a whole lot more velocity from there to get to Mars. And now you've got a ship that can sustain life for a very long time. So I think that should be like to me, maybe the most exciting part of the Polaris program is once you fly the final mission, then you know you're ready to go back to the moon. And from there, it's not as big of a leap as many would think to go to Mars, which is pretty awesome. So everything is based on like that North Star, if you will, of does it help us get to Mars, and does it help us live on Mars? So a lot of the like what you'll see with the EVA suit for our spacewalk is not about something that would necessarily replace the suit, the like EMU and suits that you'd have on space station. They'd be much more about what you'd have if you had 1,000 people living on Mars someday. So getting familiar with EVA operations, suits that you can mass produce for thousands or tens of thousands of people instead of kind of current design. The altitude element of it, so we're targeting a 1,400 kilometer apogee. That pretty much takes you right to the edge of the inner boundary of the Van Allen belts. That's going to be important if you're going to the moon or going to Mars. You're going to have to fly through them, and this will inform a lot on vehicle design. So right now, Dragon is not that hardened for radiation. It was designed with like a triple redundancy on almost all of its avionics and computing architecture that you'd have to take out a lot of systems versus using up mass for a lot of hardening. That may not be an option on like a 6 to 9 month voyage back and forth. So we're anticipating. We were just out at SpaceX yesterday. The last 2 days, so it's pretty current. But we're anticipating an awful lot. We're anticipating quite a bit's going to happen over that first, probably 5 hours on orbit. So anyway, these are kind of all components. Obviously, Starlink is very important. That's how you're going to communicate. Certainly, that's going to be Starship's preferred method of communication versus some of the older TDRS and ground stations. And that's how you're going to phone home from Mars. So that's pretty much guiding us with all phases of the Polaris program.
So let's chat about that mission there a little bit. You guys are looking at roughly the November, December timeframe for the first launch?
Yes.
Can you talk about what you're looking at there when you come up with those dates? You were mentioning this morning when we were walking around talking to some of the students that it's really not the weather here in Florida that might be the problem. It might be that downrange stuff that.
Yeah, the launch corridor weather is always really important for a launch escape. So so that'll be. I mean, that is like one of the worst times of year for us to potentially fly. So it wouldn't shock me if our November date wound up in say like a January timeframe. Also, wouldn't shock me if November wound up in October. It's SpaceX, so they're like the only launch provider that can actually pull forward dates, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Niko, you want to go ahead with that next one?
Oh yeah, looking at this amazing aircraft right here behind us, I'm wondering what the difference between you getting type rated and all these amazing fighter aircraft versus astronaut training. What does the training differences look like for a pilot versus flying to space?
Yeah, I totally underestimated it. So I mean, when you're any type of jet, any aircraft, you're getting a type rating in, you're basically getting the -1, and you study it and you take notes on systems and limitations, and you're probably not that far off from being able to safely operate it. And I don't know why I just assumed I was going to get a thick manual to study, but it was it was 6 months of academic simulation training. It was quite a bit. I had no familiarity with orbital mechanics prior to it. I had my thoughts about space physiology and space medicine and such, and so it was a pretty intense training. And I have to say, like the time I spent at SpaceX, from the mission design all through training, was really just as special as flying the mission itself. I mean, it is you're surrounded by some really incredible people, and just awesome to watch them work.
What about moving from I-4 to Polaris? How does the training regimen for these two missions diverge? What's similar about them?
It's going to actually be longer, and it's longer with a lot of people with familiarity. So just to give you a little bit about the crew on it. So Kid Poteet, he'll be the mission pilot. He was our lead Inspiration4 mission director. So he was there throughout the journey. He gained a lot of knowledge just from being in the room. Sarah Gillis, she's SpaceX's lead astronaut trainer. She's trained every crew that's gone to space, every NASA crew that's gone up on a Falcon and Dragon vehicle. She's also a core, so they're Capcom, but it's even more. It's a resource engineer. She's very talented. And then Anna Menon, she's the lead mission director on Axiom right now, and she will be as well on Crew 4 coming up as well. So you're talking about like really knowledgeable people that we are really lucky to be with on this, and the training will actually be longer. So it'll be about 8 months based on the timing we just looked at, and a lot of it's going to be based on the EVA. That's probably the highest risk component of the mission.
So go ahead.
No, I was going to ask. So a lot in previous interviews and things like that, you've talked about how the spacecraft borderline can fly itself, and but you still have to go through all this training. But I want to talk about the software that runs these things. How do you think that is changing the training regimen for going to space, and how do you think that's making a positive impact on the commercial aspect of spaceflight?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. So you imagine you get asked a question a lot of like, hey, I want to grow up and be an astronaut. What career field should I focus on? And like my two answers, like it's engineering and it's medicine. I mean, I think those are your two most demanding positions. It's not going to be test pilots like it was in the past. I mean, Dragon is very automated. It has a fantastic autopilot. There are still manual backups for everything. Give you some idea, like when you launch, it doesn't know where or when it's coming home, and that's because you don't know which site is supported based on weather at the time. So in the event anything went wrong initially, before you've determined that, it's entirely a manual flight home. There are other scenarios where, like fire or some of the worst type things, emergency depress, where you just simply don't even have time to coordinate with ground, where it has some manual capabilities. But look, it's fantastic today. It's only going to get more fantastic as it continues to evolve. Here's why I say like medicine for one. It's about 50% of people have space adaptation syndrome when you get on orbit. It doesn't matter, like you can be hardcore fighter pilot, like it can happen. But 100% of people feel differently, and you stay feeling differently the entire time you're there. And it's gonna take really, it's gonna take people with with medical training to be able to help people through it. I mean, we had 2 of our crew members wound up getting injections on orbit, and within 8 hours they were happy and productive, good crew members again. It was awesome. But yeah, I think like it's going to be engineering, fixing things that can't be done remotely, especially when you have really long communication delays, is going to be very important, and keeping people healthy. Say is going to be another top priority.
So let's go back to that about getting sick on orbit. I've talked to other folks that had different approaches on commanders that had different approaches on that. A lot of them talk about it, as soon as you get on orbit, you want to be busy. What's your thoughts on that? Did you think about any of that with your mission plannings? Like, is there anything that says, do you want to look out the window for a few minutes, or do you want to get right to work and maybe help with some of that sickness?
Yeah, I mean, the advice that we are given is to not rush into anything and give yourself time to adjust and take in, everything that your senses are, absorbing in that moment. So, I mean, my understanding actually from talking to some astronauts who have gotten sick is they tried to do too much. You catch something out of the corner of your eye with just Earth, with the vehicle rotating on its axis, and it just gets you. But we did generally take it slow. I think some people that we just were in Houston a couple weeks ago, where the researchers were giving us some of the preliminary results from some of these neurovestibular tests we did, where I couldn't tell from looking at the graphs that they were able, but according to them, they were able to predict with certainty the 50% of the crew that did get sick. To me, it all looked generally the same. But in any case, like some people just might be predisposed to it, and based on very minor things that are different for us. There's a lot going on there. I mean, the fluid shifts. You do feel like you're hanging upside down from your bed, and that does not go away really at all. It just gets more manageable. And the way people's symptoms present can be very, very different. We saw that, but it's very common. But it's all treatable. That's like the point. I mean, people who've been up on space station for 6 months, people who've been on Mir far longer than that, and they definitely didn't arrive happy. And within really can be within hours. You can be good to go again.
So if Starship is, if the big mission here is to get us to Mars, multiplanetary humanity here, Starship's a big player in that, obviously, and obviously that's a goal here on Polaris. That third part of Polaris will be first manned or occupied flight with Starship. How are you being introduced to Starship now? Is it going to be very similar to Dragon, or is it going to be a completely different monster?
Yeah, I mean, so much right now. The big priority is just get the orbital test going, and it's pretty exciting because some of the delays in the regulatory process have allowed them to just continue to leap, vehicle serial numbers, constantly putting in improvements. Now they're going to fly it with Raptor 2 engines, so even though there are delays, good progress is being made that will get us closer to kind of that end goal. So it'll be exciting to see those launches go. There are definitely some elements that will be scaled up from Dragon because it works. Then there's going to be some elements like it's you're going to have to handle your ECLS, your life support systems, very different for a super long duration mission than you would on Dragon. So there will be some differences.
So what you guys just out there preliminary planning, thinking about this on that first Starship ride? How long are you guys thinking about taking it up? Is it going to be one of those multi-week kind of events, or is it just going to be a test flight?
Well, I think there's a good chance that not that long after that mission, you're probably gonna take a cislunar type shot. So I would think we would build into our flight plan, like, one, you want to know you have just a good vehicle. You want to know you're going to do it uncrewed for a while, but you want to be able to do space-based refueling. That's vital to the whole Starship strategy. And then I would think we would try and do as much as we can to de-risk the next mission. But we got such a long way to go to get to that. Polaris Dawn is there's plenty for us to still be figuring out on that mission. So that's a lot of the attention now.
Sure, and some of that is with on the Polaris Dawn is with the Starlink system. How's that laser communication? Right? Is that going to, as you mentioned earlier, it's going to be a big step to long duration far flights?
Yeah, I mean, so important. You're talking 15, 20 minutes to send a message home from Mars. So, you know, I mean, it is an essential piece of technology for this. I can't emphasize enough because it's there's a lot of things people are trying to solve for technologically to get there, and it will happen. There are things that are, you know, psychological considerations. I mean, you know, space station, you can look out the cupola and see a big giant Earth, and you know you're literally within 2 hours you could be in the water. You know, the moon, you can see Earth, you're 2.5 days from being in the water. You know, 6 to 9 months and seeing a blue speck in the sky. So I think having, you know, a capability like Starlink to keep that that kind of connection home, like good, like, you know, high resolution type video messages might be essential to just sanity in that environment. I mean, there's really a lot of questions there to it, and it's going to take a lot of smart people to figure them out before we get to that point. But that is one of the 3 important objectives for Polaris Dawn.
Perfect. So one more big picture one before we move on to some questions there with our students here. You know, a year ago, let's go back to a year ago. So we've been talking about commercial space flight for, you know, since I've been teaching Embry-Riddle. We've been talking about it just about every year, and it was always something down the road. And then it seemed like all at once we have 3 different companies really going out and doing commercial. And now, right now, as we speak, actually one just went up. We got Crew 4 going up here in just a couple of days. You guys are talking about flying Starship. Wow, this is changing quickly. How does that feel to be in the middle of that? And are you excited about that, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, what an amazing time. What an amazing time we're living in right now. It's incredible, but it does come back to even the very first question. I mean, you know, for as many people who are excited about what we're seeing, there are plenty of people who are not as enthusiastic. And like, that has to be at the forefront of every one of these missions. Like, it's so important that you're making as much of an impact here on Earth as you're trying to accomplish in space. Because you get that sentiment shift in, you know, one direction in the wrong way. Like, a lot of this can go away. Everything that's being done right now is super expensive. This is a very capital-intense environment in commercial spaceflight right now, and you know, you lose support in the wrong direction, the brakes go on really fast. So yeah, it's very exciting, but this all comes with big obligations for all the organizations that are participating, not to mess this one up.
And Jared, you know, you mentioned that you know we're pushing technology in space, and as well as doing that, we're enhancing things here on Earth. And I think one thing that has been talked about before is with Starlink, increasing communication for people that don't have that here on the planet. You know, do you have any thoughts on that, especially with the, you know, St. Jude, you know, for help across the planet? Like, what's your opinion?
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, I think, like, look, as you can bring down the cost of, you know, accelerating mass to orbit, who knows how many interesting things will become a part of our lives. Starlink is one example of it, for sure. I mean, you know, a launch provider that's vertically integrated, you know, satellites with broadband capability, you know, to put a constellation up that can connect people to the hardest places to reach on Earth. Yeah, I mean, I think even coming out of the pandemic and seeing the importance now, you know, broadband, you know, communication is vital for remote learning. It's important for telemedicine. There's no question. There's Starlink terminals, you know, right now in Poland and Ukraine that were brought there with connections back to St. Jude to help families. And yeah, I mean, you just don't know what can happen when costs come down to such like a you know, dramatically reduced level. What you're able to experiment with. I mean, think about, you know, 15 years ago, you could have 10 satellites that all have really great ideas, but if it costs $250 million to put it up, there's 9 of them that aren't going to get a chance, right? Now you've got ride sharing going on in these vehicles. You know, they can hitch a ride at very low cost, and when Starship comes online, even more. So yeah, I mean, we're incredibly excited about what Starlink can do. I mean, billions of people that don't have, you know, access to broadband communication that Starlink will help enable. But there's going to be more, and we just haven't thought of it yet because nobody's been in a position for such the world hasn't had the advantage of being able to put put mass in orbit at the cost that they're rapidly approaching, and that just has so many possibilities.
Yeah, what is it? I think right at 600 people total has been in orbit as well, and to get those brain cells up there too, it changes. More people you can get up there. Starship, carry 60 folks or something like that. That's going to be impressive as well. So I told Niko and Alijah here that if we had a couple minutes to quiz a couple of their peers out there, their fellow students, and if they had a question or two, we could share. We probably got one or so each from you guys. If you want to ask those real fast, go ahead.
Yeah. I asked some of my friends what they were very curious about, and one of my friends mentioned they really wanted to know what it was like living 2 days on orbit with 4 people in such a tiny volume. I guess you get really personal and close with your crew members.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it's a lot roomier than you think when you have all of that kind of vertical volume to work with. We did a 30-hour simulation, in Hawthorne where we locked ourselves in, and SpaceX thought it was so funny. They did a before and after picture, and they thought we'd be so unhappy when we came out. Like, we were all smiling. First of all, the time just disappears. You don't realize it at all. I mean, we were up for 72 hours. If you told me it was 24, it sounds right. Like, when you're just kind of driving off that timeline and just thinking about the next thing you're supposed to do, it just melts away. So we were happy coming out of it. The only difference I'd say is you actually sleep better, even though it's not great. You still sleep better in space than you do trying to sleep in 1G in the simulator. But no, it was we were happy. We ate. You had a lot more space than you might think when you start kind of sectioning things off in thirds. You got a privacy curtain to separate the top from the middle, and then you've got your seats to separate the middle to the bottom. And anything, relative to the Soyuz is super roomy. I mean, that's a big claustrophobic event right there.
Yeah, the Soyuz was a pretty tight capsule. All right, so I have a question from a couple of my friends over in the rocket lab. As an Embry-Riddle alumni, how does it feel knowing that maybe some Embry-Riddle undergrads worked on the rocket that you went up on?
It's so cool. So we just came from SpaceX, and Lori, and forgive me, last name's eluding me right now, but she's the Dragon integration lead. I mean, her undergrad and masters were here at Embry-Riddle. She took part in a number of the clubs. We were just talking about the Llama Cam from Embry-Riddle, and she wanted everyone to pass along her best. It's fantastic, and to me, whether it's SpaceX or Blue Origin, people coming right out of school here, the amount of hands-on work and responsibility you get is just awesome during these times. So, yeah, no, it feels great. There were some ex-Draken employees that were working on the rocket that I met down at the Cape too. It's cool. A lot of people are contributing to really all that's going on right now.
Do we have time for one more? Yeah. I'm very curious. What's your favorite aircraft you've ever flown, and why?
The MiG-29 is a pretty amazing beast. A lot of performance there.
I'm hearing Viper from the crowd for sure right there.
Honestly, actually, my favorite it was the A4N Skyhawk. It's often called the Super Fox. Had the big motor, 20% more thrust. This is what the Blue Angels flew. This is what you saw in Top Gun. I mean, half internal fuel, you're 1-to-1 thrust to weight, which is pretty cool without an afterburner. And it's it was in Top Gun, so.
I think every year we actually have a Top Gun showing in this hangar for new students.
Required.
Cool. Yeah, required. So I got a question. So how do you think your piloting background, could you explain to us actually how your piloting background shifted to coming to Embry-Riddle, and then how your experience as a pilot and now space commander has just affected your life from a day-to-day basis, how you think about going about doing things, and how you approach just being you?
Yeah. So there's a lot there to that. The reason I came to Embry-Riddle, I was actually I guess 28 or so. I mean, much later in life, and I was already flying air shows, with this guy on the Black Diamond Jet team, and I didn't even realize that there was like a reserve or National Guard, and you need a college degree. Embry-Riddle was just perfect since it was an aviation-oriented university, and just gravitated towards it. So really, it was because I thought maybe there was a possibility I would join the Guard. Anyway, long time ago, didn't wind up joining the Guard, but we wound up building a company to help train the Air Force, and it was very cool to do. I'd say like my aviation background, helpful or not, like in space flight. There's no question. Like when you would sit in front of the Dragon screens, it's very intuitive. It's like any glass cockpit. So your G1000 type thing, you just feel already at home navigating the screens. I feel like with myself and Dr. Proctor, if you didn't have pilots in those seats, it's probably some weeks or months of additional training, just familiarizing yourself with the avionics and what they mean and what they're telling you. Obviously, anything related to like procedures and checklist driven and how we approach emergencies. And look, even your attitude when you're in one of those situations, flying definitely prepares you for it. So.
Outstanding. So let's talk about before we're able to wrap things up here. You've had a lot of success, Jared, with building great teams around you, and I think everybody in the aviation aerospace world understands, from maintenance to air traffic control to pilot to dispatch. You understand it's a team environment. What do you look for when you're looking to put together a team? And I know that Inspiration 4 was some of that was handed to you. You didn't necessarily do the picking. How do you approach that as a leader?
Yeah, it's two interesting questions, right? Because you have a choice of who you interact with in business and or when we were flying air shows. I mean, you have the ability to build who your team is. Inspiration 4 was different because the 3 crew members were all essentially random, and the stars couldn't have aligned better. Because what a crew. But obviously, how you approach that is a lot different. I would say, in Inspiration 4. Really kind of setting the right expectations up front. Like, know exactly what you're getting into, so we don't have any surprises later. Like, we are going to earn this every step of the way. None of us are Top Gun. We are not the best of the best. We're lucky to be here. So everything we're going to do from here forward is going to have a lot of structure to it. We are going to brief and debrief every single day. We're going to go into this really prepared, and we're going to earn it. Because if we get this right, there's going to be a lot more interesting missions to follow. I think outside of Inspiration 4, just generally building teams, I think some of it depends on what you're setting out to do. I think at times people can like make mistakes of actually gravitating more towards those that you're already familiar with or who think the way you think, and that can be a major mistake. Actually, I think bringing in different perspectives is so incredibly important right now, that can challenge the way people think. And there's probably no better example of that than what I've seen at SpaceX. You have this unbelievable collection of talent. They're all very, mission-driven individuals. They don't all think about things the same way. And that's why some of it is guiding principles within the organization to kind of follow, but it's just a lot of unique perspectives. For example, our EVA training, if you were to just kind of say, well, how should you do that? Why wouldn't you should probably just go to a neutral buoyancy lab because that's how it's been done before. They start from scratch, and you have like, let's challenge ourselves. If this is the first time this has ever been done with the tools that are available to us, what would we do that's more maybe analogous to this? And we're like, why don't we take them like a few hundred feet off an oil rig platform with an umbilical? And we think this will have a number of benefits, in addition to maybe some potential psychological stressors and such. And it was a very fascinating approach, and that's actually being incorporated into our training. But I think right now, like, one of the biggest mistakes I see when assembling teams, you gravitate towards your friends, you gravitate towards people that you've worked with in the past that might think about things the same way as you, and you'll wind up getting probably the same type of outcome. Versus maybe a superior one if you really challenge yourself to go outside your comfort zone to bring together people with that think about things different life experiences, different backgrounds.
Yeah, it's a good one, and I have to mention because you know, I wouldn't get any adult beverages if I didn't. You pulled some talent out of that red, white, and blue hangar out at Nellis that we're all pretty proud of out there.
Yeah, there are 4 former Thunderbirds that are part of the Polaris program, so including this guy.
Oh, not bragging or anything, but we will point it out there. So, hey,
it's understandable why you did.
I know. I thought I'd get some from Strucker there. So we're about to wrap up time here. We do have a last question. I mean, you can look out here in the audience, Jared, and you can see we got quite a few students, a bunch of students watching us online in an overflow building over there. What's your advice in this stage in their life, moving into this world that you're creating out there, basically? What's your advice for them to move forward if they want to be in part of this aviation aerospace world?
Well, I mean, look, it's not that unthinkable. There are I mean, what a great time to be in, aerospace right now. You have so many new organizations that have come to be lately. I mean, of course, there's like the 2 or 3 big names that make a lot of headlines. There are so many others that are in the supporting cast doing incredible things right now. This is an awesome time to do it. There is a lot of capital that's flowing into the space right now. There will be several winners, which is great. I think my advice is just just aim high. This is the time to do it. You never know. You never know what might be possible. So I certainly, the folks that I've been lucky enough to work with over the last year have been aiming pretty high and achieving some pretty incredible things.
Outstanding. Well, we're at the top of the hour, the time we'd committed here for it. So let me just speak for the entire Embry-Riddle community. Thanks so much for taking the time and coming out and visiting the campus. You and your team are welcome back, of course, anytime. And I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Alijah, Niko, thank you so much for your time as well. We appreciate you coming out and helping us out. And as we wrap things up here, I think I'm going to hand it over to somebody, but I think we're going to stand by for pictures or chat, and there's a couple things like that. And we'll go ahead and sign off back there with our Zoom and finish it up. Jared, appreciate it.
Thank you.